Welcome to Stay Home, Stay Focused. I'm Jack Moline. I'm president of Interfaith Alliance. My very special guest today is my longtime friend, Nell Minow, a corporate governance expert, film reviewer, writer, and all sorts of other things that in 20 minutes I can't even begin to list. But Nell, before we begin anything else, let me ask you, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I've got this weird disconnect where inside my house, I'm in this beautiful honeymoon bubble and baking bread and watching movies and writing, and it's not tremendously different from my normal life. And then there's this outside of chaos and uncertainty and tragedy that I allow myself to think about a certain amount every day, but not all the time.
So when that intrudes on your life, how do you return to your focus?
If you had asked me in January, you're going to be perfectly healthy, you're going to be feeling good, everybody in your family's going to be healthy, and you're going to be confined to home for a while, I would have said, oh, I have this big pile of books that I want to read. I have these very difficult, complex movies that I've always wanted to catch up on and spend more time with. None of that is happening. It's basically comfort food all the way around. So I'm returning to books that I have loved for years and enjoying them again, and movies that I've loved for years. I'm watching a lot of Turner Classic movies. I've baked, I think, 7 kinds of bread, over
Wow.
10 loaves, but 7 kinds. And I'm basically turned into my grandmother. I've been making soup, I've been knitting. That's what I do.
But not putting newspaper on the kitchen floor after you watch it.
No, and no plastic on the sofas, but also writing letters, returning to one of the great pleasures of my life. I write letters anyway, but I'm now writing more letters. I have a fountain pen and lovely stationery and beautiful stamps. And my sisters and I have just started writing each other letters, so we have something fun in the mailbox.
Isn't that wonderful? There is something to being able to hold people's words in your hands rather than looking them at them on a screen that just makes all the difference in the world.
It does, and it's just like a little surprise, a little happy sparkle that comes with all of the flyers and bills and other things.
And speaking of writing notes, you and I met sitting next to each other in freshman study hall when we were in high
That's
school,
correct.
and then
Letter M,
right,
alphabetically.
alphabetically, and then 20 years later, we found ourselves living in the same neighborhood. Interestingly enough, with one other member of our graduating class from high school, in like a 3 block radius,
Yeah.
and so here we are still all these years later. Um, and and I need to have at least 3 conversations with you in these 20 minutes. But before we do that, you get to plug your husband's new book. David Apatow has a new book out.
Yes, our other high school classmate, my husband, David Apatow, has a new book out, the 7th in a series that he's done of biographies of American artists. This one's name is Mead Schaefer. And in the book is one of the most romantic stories you will ever hear. And anybody who wants to know that story, send me an email at moviemom@moviemom.com. I will send you the story,
Or buy the book.
or buy the book. If the story doesn't make you buy the book, then you've got no heart.
There you go. There you go. So these days you have at least 2 careers. And I want to ask you first about the one that I think most lay people know you by, and that is as the movie mom. How did you become a film reviewer and an arbiter of family viewing?
You are unique in being able to understand this next story, because I was reading a book by Louisa May Alcott, not Little Women, but I've read all of her books. And in the book, the characters play charades. And the answer in the charade was a story from the Bible that I did not know, but I know you know, Bilam and the ass.
Yep.
And everybody in the room immediately identified this story. And I said to myself, what is it today that is as universal to our culture as Balaam and the Ass was in the post-Civil War period for the characters in a book by Louise May Alcott? It's movies. And maybe I could use movies to help illustrate some of the difficult and complicated issues that families sometimes find hard to talk about. So I wrote my first book about movies, The Movie Mom's Guide to Family Movies, and I had them organized by issues like competition, bullying, family conflict, and with questions after them so that families could use those as a starting point for important conversations.
So I imagine that families are watching a lot of movies these days, television shows as well, I'm sure, but a lot of movies in front of the TV. Should the movies that people are watching during this pandemic serve to distract them from the pandemic and its crisis, or promote conversation about it?
Well, even a movie that seems that it is not about the crisis, you could watch a movie like Contagion, which is about something very similar, that's very similar to what's going on now, but still gives you a chance to talk about it in whatever way is comfortable for you. So that, generally speaking, movies are about people who are solving problems or learning lessons. And that's something that's applicable to whatever you're talking about. So if they're solving a problem because they're doing a bank heist or something, you can still talk to the family about the good and bad decisions they made. I particularly love heist films because there's a lot of planning involved, a lot of problem solving, and then things always go wrong in the moment, and to see how people respond to that. So any movie can start a conversation. I, by the way, have put on the moviemom.com website now 10 different lists of movies for families to watch together.
Wow.
And mostly they're very cheerful family movies. And one about kids playing music, one about documentaries about real life children, one movie's based on great books, etc. The one that I put up this week is about great love stories that you probably haven't seen. So everybody knows, Notting Hill or whatever. But these are wonderful movies about romance that are not as well known.
For example?
Well, one of my favorites is I Love You Again with William Powell and Myrna Loy, who are the greatest couple ever. They made the most movies together in the sound era of any couple. Wonderful chemistry, and everybody knows The Thin Man. But I Love You Again is one of my favorites because it's about a man who is just the most boring human being on earth until he gets hit on the head and realizes he's a con man who's had amnesia. And it's about what he does to kind of straighten that all out. And it's wonderful.
That's great. And I imagine that Miss March is not on that list.
No, it's not on that list. I can't believe you brought that up. Miss March is a movie that literally got only 2 good reviews. And the 2 people who wrote the good reviews were sitting on either side of me as we watched it together. So I don't know what the chemistry was there. But yeah.
Sort of restoring balance to the universe, I'm guessing.
That's right. It must have been my loathing for that movie somehow mutated. So there were 2 guys on either side of me.
What are the 3 genres of movies that you personally like the best?
Well, I do like romances very much. I like witty dialogue, and so wherever that comes, I'm there. As I said, I love heist films. I am a Comic-Con attending fangirl. I'm heartbroken that Comic-Con's canceled this year. So I love me some Marvel movies. I love just about every kind of genre. You have to if you're a critic and you're watching at least one movie every day of your life, except for horror movies. I won't do horror because the entire review would be, I covered my eyes and then the movie was over. Although one of the most popular reviews on my website is one that went like this. There was no way on earth I was going to see this movie. I asked my 19-year-old college-age son to review it for me, and here's what he had to say. That's still one of my most popular reviews.
There you go.
Freddy versus Michael. Yeah.
The other career you have now is in corporate governance. And our mutual friend and also high school buddy, Bob Ellisberg, once wrote that the 7 most terrifying words to a corporate executive are, "I have Nell Minow on line 2." So I want to ask you about corporate governance, and you acknowledged your husband. I have to acknowledge my wife, who's a business writer, who set me up with this question. And there's a price I have to pay at the end. What are the responsibilities of a corporation to the broader universe of stakeholders beyond profits in this pandemic?
Wow. That is such a great question, and it would take me about an hour to answer, but this is the short answer.
Good.
There is no way that a corporation can meet the needs of its investors, who, let's face it, are teachers, firemen. These are pension funds. This is not just the Koch brothers. This is the primary investors are us, employees of TIAA-CREF or wherever you've got your pension money. And so you can't meet your obligation to your shareholders without serving the needs of your employees, your community, et cetera. The largest area of investment growth right now is called ESG, environment, social, governance. In other words, looking at the broader picture, all of that. On the other hand, there's a lot of rhetoric about serving the needs of stakeholders that is often just a way of saying, okay, we didn't hit our numbers this year, but you still have to pay me the same amount anyway, because the Girl Scout cookie drive was really, really successful in our cafeteria. So you got to be very, very, very careful about that. And that's why I think that pension funds, who are essentially permanent shareholders, are great stewards on behalf of all of the stakeholders.
And so we should be communicating with the folks who hold our retirement money and our investment money to make sure that they're focused on some of these issues.
Well, sure. And partly because of a lobbying effort by my business partner for 14 years, the SEC now requires them to let you know, are they voting in favor of outrageous pay plans? Are they voting against environmental proposals submitted by shareholders like yourself? There's a huge, massively funded effort right now at the SEC to cut off even the slightest shareholder oversight. I've been fighting that very, very hard for about 18 months now. Because, they may say, as I said, the corporate executives may say, we're all about the stakeholders, but they don't really want to hear from us. So it's important to know how your money is being managed to make sure that it reflects your values.
So here's the cost of the help I got for asking that question. My wife wants me to ask you about the importance of gender diversity in corporate governance in these matters.
Well, it's not just this is one that applies to Hollywood as well as corporate governance. So this goes across the board for me. You know how when you go to a movie and you're watching the credits at the end and it says no animals were hurt in the making of this movie? Well, there's
Yeah.
a new addition to that about gender parity in the movies. And I just put the list on my website at moviemom.com of the movies that have already qualified as saying that both in front of the screen and behind the screen, we've achieved gender parity. We work on that on the corporate side as well, publishing lists of boards that don't have a single woman. What we found is you have to have at least 3 women for it to make a difference. You've got to have, it's not enough just to have one and then she retires and you fill that spot. And it does make a huge difference, and that's what a lot of these shareholder proposals are all about. So companies that are diverse do better. How hard is it to figure that out? It's obvious.
Well,
You want to reflect the customer base and the employees.
and also make for a make for progress in the real sense of the word, not in the financial necessarily sense of the word, in taking advantage of the resources that exist in half the population that is often so neglected.
The data shows that it is the financial, that it is totally financial. It's completely financial. How, it's not, it doesn't take rocket scientists to figure out that you got to have people in the boardroom who reflect the people that you're dealing with, both as employees and customers and also as investors.
Terrific.
I once got into an argument with a CEO who was one of the CEOs. I got fired later on, but this was before that. And he was saying to me, "You're going to love our annual report this year." And I said, "Why? Did you make the governance changes? Did you get rid of your non-core assets? Did you do all these things that we've been asking you to do?" And he looked at me, he said, "No, we have a woman in a hard hat on the cover of the annual report." So that was supposed to make me happy and go away.
Yeah, he didn't know who he was dealing with. So now I want to try to bring these two things together, not that you haven't already done it for me, anticipating this question. What is the intersection of film and corporate governance that needs to help us get through this pandemic?
Well, I am a bossy, opinionated oldest child. Back at New Trier, when we were in high school, one of my teachers said, "You think you can make a living as a smart aleck?" I didn't realize that that was a rhetorical question. I considered it career guidance. And so I managed to find several careers where I do not, including when I was in the government looking at regulatory programs, where I do nothing but complain about what needs to be fixed all the time. So it's really just systems analysis. I'm very interested in why things don't work the way that they're supposed to. Whether it's a corporation, they want to make money, they want to do a good job, they want people to buy their products. If it doesn't work, I'm really interested in why. And if a movie, everybody who makes the movie, there are a lot of people involved in making a movie, they want it to succeed. If it doesn't succeed, I'm interested in why. And in a pandemic like this one, if we don't respond the way that makes sense, if people think that because they can't see it and touch it and feel it, that means that they're invulnerable to it, why is that? What have we failed to communicate? How can we do better next time? And that's really what all of my jobs have been about. You know, David found my college application, which I hadn't looked at in many, many years. And it said, "What do you see yourself doing in 10 years? And I had no recollection. And what I had written at age 17 was, "I'm currently considering 5 careers." And I've done 4 of them. I've done 4 of them. The 5th one was rabbi. The first woman rabbi had just been ordained, and I was very excited by that. So I may get around. I may give you a little competition at some point. But so far,
Okay.
I have done the other 4, which are reader, teacher, lawyer, and something to do with movies.
Well, I'd be happy to be your surrogate if you need it, just to finish your bucket list there.
Okay.
Are there going to be movies again anytime soon?
There are movies. There are 3 movies that are being streamed this week that were originally intended for theaters. And I think we're going to continue to see a lot of that. But I think the success of the ones that have come in as streaming, even at the higher prices, what they call the pre-theater, whatever, means that we'll have more opportunities. I mean, you know very well that theatrical movies are generally designed for people between the ages of 12 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
They're a wonderful audience for movies. They're the only people who will say, "That was great, let's go see it again next week." They're a wonderful audience. But movies for grown-ups generally are the ones that we watch at home. And so I think this is the greatest time in history for screen content of any kind, whether it's on a screen in a theater or on your laptop or on your big screen TV. And so I think we're going to continue to have this extraordinary bounty of movies, but it'll be different.
All right, I got 1,000 more questions, and I got about 30 seconds left. So thank you, Nell, for being here. It is such a pleasure every time I'm able to renew conversation with you, I learn something and I have a great time, and you can't ask for more than that. Say the name of your Movie Mom site again so that everybody goes and takes a look.
Moviemom.com.
There you go. Easy to remember. Last question. Something to inspire or engage people while they're sitting at home and waiting this out.
Well, people have asked me in the past, how do I know if this is the right person to marry? And I've always said it's the airport test. You're at the airport, the flight's been delayed 3 hours. Is this somebody that you can enjoy spending that time with, who's going to be upbeat and constructive and fun to talk to? Well, we're on the airport test big time right now. And the most important thing I can say is be good at surrounding yourself with people who are exciting and curious and fun and positive, and you'll do fine. You can get through anything.
It's great. It sounds like the airport test meets Groundhog Day. So, Nell, thank you for being with me today. And to those of you who are viewing and watching us, stay home and stay focused.